All right, welcome back to the 55 Buick build, the POS special, because it's a piece of shit. Should I say that? I don't know. Whatever, it's my piece of shit and I like it. Okay, so next small project on this big project is going to be the steering column. So we have to convert nothing to something. Next project is to connect a cut-off steering column where it used to go to a steering box to a Jaguar rack and pinion stub. All right, how are we gonna do it? Okay, this is what I have to work with. I have a 3/4 inch 48 spline on one end that connects to the Jaguar rack, and 3/4 inch double D on the other side, which is just standard 3/4 double D. I have a U-joint, which is 3/4 double D on both sides. This will be the joint that's going to be the end on the end of the steering column. I have a high-tech lawnmower axle bearing with a 3/4 inch ID on the center. I have a stub of 3/4 inch double D shaft, which is from a 4th gen Z28 piece of the steering linkage, because I had it. You don't need to have that. I have it. You can buy this, which is I'm going to need to use this anyway. This is just a length of 3/4 inch double D shaft. You can get them in all different lengths off eBay or wherever. I buy long lengths because I do this pretty regularly. So anyway, I'm only using this because I have it, and I'm a hoarder, and I like to use things that I have laying around. So this is all it's good for. So let's use it. So this is what we're going to do. Oh, well, you know what? One thing I want to just mention about these U-joints, when you're doing your mock-up for your steering, in case I forget to mention it later. When you put your steering shaft into the joint, we'll slide it in there, you don't want to put it sticking in too far. You don't want to do that when you make your cuts, when you make your length there, because what that's going to do is cause interference when the joint tries to move. It's going to hit that. So when you make the final length of the steering shaft, set it up with the 3/4 shaft, just stick it in there proud so you have a little bit, but the U-joint can do full travel and not hit anything. So, and that even slid back. So you stick it in right in there, but you make sure that you can move this joint all the way with it hitting nothing. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy when you put it together and the first time you go to turn the car. It's not going to work. All right, let's get started. First thing I have to do, I'm going to get the steering column out of the car, and we'll go from there. Okay, so ready to get the steering column out, and I will say, holy smokes, I've left the windows up on this car, and man, this interior, it stinks in here, holy smokes. But anyway, so looking at steering column here, I got a rubber cover here, some Phillips head screws to get that off, some wiring, which I'm just going to hack because I don't care. I'm going to cut it all out. I'll save the neutral safety switch on the column and all that stuff on the column. This is the horn contact button there. That should be a spring-loaded contact that touches the steering shaft for ground. There's just some bolts under here holding the column up, the clamp there. And I think that should be about it. So, we get this apart. Okay, the column is coming out. And to get it out, there's just these two 3/8 bolts, one on either side, that go horizontally into this clamp here. You just take the nuts off and this drops down. You don't have to take these out. Those hold the clamp to the column, so I won't lose my reference as far as where the column was. You can scribe it if you need to. And obviously with that clamp, the column's adjustable to a point. I mean, if you don't like where the column is, you could set it up in a different spot now before you do your steering shaft. But I'm going to leave it stock right where it was, and Hopefully that's a good spot. We'll have to see. I disconnected all my wiring from the column. Oops. And I dropped my phone. And I just unbolted the rubber pad from the firewall. Now the pad has a slit in it at the top, which would make it removable, but the rubber's so old it's probably just gonna self-destruct if I try to do that. So I'm gonna leave it in place for now. It's just unbolted, and we'll get this out. Just cut off a section of this tube here so I can get access to the steering shaft. You can see I'm just using I put a worm gear clamp on here just as a reference to get a straight line. That's that. All right, clean the grease off of that. Next thing I'm going to do is take a grinder and just clean up this a little bit, and I'm going to put a little bit of a bevel edge on it. See, I just put a bevel around the outside edge of the shaft. That's to taper it in, so I've got some more surface area to weld to when I burn this together. All right, next step. All right, so we have this hole here in the middle of the shaft. It's kind of small. It's about maybe a 1/4 inch right now. I'm going to open that up to 3/8 with the drill. There we go. Okay. All right. Now we got a 3/8 hole in there. Why am I going to do that? Why am I doing that? Well, I'm going to take this section here, this stub of 3/4 double D, and I am going to modify probably half of it and turn it down to a 3/8 stub that's going to fit into that hole. Now I'm going to do this on my lathe. I've done it with a grinder and a cutoff wheel, and it works just fine. All you do is cut it down rough with the cutoff wheel, and use a grinder and turn it and just get it down and just keep rechecking until it fits tight in the hole. It's not a big deal if it's not perfect. We're not talking a drive shaft here spinning, 10,000 RPM. It's just a steering shaft, and if you get it a little bit off center, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. But I'm going to put it in the lathe. I've never done this in the lathe before. Like I said, I'm not a machinist, and I just got my lathe before I was, during this car build. So I'm going to turn this down on the lathe for the first time and see how it does. All right, we're in the middle of turning this down. I said I'm no machinist, so I'm sneaking up on it a few thousandths at a time, and it takes some time. Use the dial indicator to get the piece centered in the chuck, which wasn't easy because the double D shaft is not exactly round. So just sneaking up on it. I got to turn that down to match the 3/8 drill bit. So still not there yet, but we're getting there. Just keep working it. All right, here's my 3/4 double D stub. And I made it a little bit bigger. The end is a little bit tapered, but I made it so it's going to be a real tight fit on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up this shaft with the torch. and see if that falls in there. And I want to make it a tight interference fit. Also machined a chamfer on the end of it there as it transitions into the machine part, and that'll be where it'll be welded as well. And we're going to pin it too, so lots of stuff to do to make sure it's safe. All right, here we go. Alright, so next step will be to weld these together in that chamfered area there on the in here. Fill that in good with weld and go to the next step. Alright, next step after welding that stub to the steering shaft is we're going to pin it. Part of the other reason that I turn that section down to install into the tube here is so that I can put a piece of 1/4 inch pin right through this steering shaft. Yeah. Well, I'm going to drill a hole through this all the way through and then put this 1/4 inch pin in there and then weld that in. So that basically pins this section here to the original steering shaft. So it's welded and pinned. So it's just double safety. That's all. So we get the hole drilled and get that done. There's our 1/4 inch hole. Drilled all the way through. And we got our pin. And we'll just put the pin in the shaft. Tap it in. See what it looks like on the other side. So I can come through a little bit more. Okay, and there's our 1/4 inch pin all the way through that. And now we'll weld the pin to the steering shaft on both sides. And that will be that. All right, that's it. Pin is welded on both sides. And that is as safe as I can make it. So it's welded in and pinned in and not going anywhere. All right, okay, so here's where we are. We have the stub made, stub welded, stub pinned, stubs in. Okay, next things we have to do. We have our high-tech lawnmower axle bearing. We know that's going to go there. And we have our double D U-joint. And we know that's going to go there. Shaft is all the way into the joint perfectly, so that's very nice. So now we have a gap. And the original piece that I cut out, too short, not going to work. But I need a piece. And before I measure this, I just mentioned there's usually a spring on the steering column. You know, your steering wheel, it's under the steering wheel. So the steering column might be standing up a little bit. So I got to push down. It's actually pretty good. It's not a real big heavy spring, so not bad. I'm going to take a measurement here and figure out just how big of a piece I need. And my eyes suck. But it looks like if I start at 2 3/4, I can trim it back. Rather have a little bit longer than I need and be able to trim a little bit if I want. So I need a piece 2 3/4 long. And what I need is a piece of tubing to bridge that gap. Well, because I'm a hoarder, I have some of this small, I don't know, it's too small to be exhaust pipe, I don't know. I bought a bunch of these at a swap meet because they were like $1 each, and I'm like, you know what, I can use that somewhere. Usually on a gas filler, because I'm always changing gas tanks and making custom gas fillers. So a lot of times this stuff works for that. But it also just happens to be a perfect diameter to extend this column. Now, it is not the perfect diameter for the bearing, but that's okay. We can work with that. So what I'm going to do first is cut a piece of this 2 3/4 inches long, so I have the first part to work with. Here's my piece of tubing here, and what I do is basically just put some slices in one end, and then I'm going to put a hose clamp on it, and then I'm going to crank down on the hose clamp and compress that tube until the bearing fits it. Simple, right? All right, get that done. All right, sliced up the piece of tubing. Bearing now snaps right in, fits good. So now I just have to weld up all the slots, and I'm going to put a couple, just a few tack welds to hold the bearing in place on the tube. And we'll go to the next step. So all the slots or slits in the piece are welded up. The bearing was a tight press fit into the tube, and I just put 3 little tack welds on it to hold it in place. And that's done. So all that's left for the steering column now, that fits on. I trim the length of the piece down so that I have a correct amount of stub sticking out of there from my U-joint. And now we just have to clamp that and weld that to the steering column. I put a little bit of a bevel on the end of the piece here and the end of the column, so there's something for the weld to grab. And before I weld it on, I'm going to pack some grease in here too, because there was a lot of grease in there. I think it was to help lubricate the shift mechanism there, so I'm going to pump a bunch of grease into there just so it's in there and put this together. Alright, so last step. Have the Allen keys for the U-joint here. I'm going to push this down and tighten the U-joint. Tighten the Allen key good and tight, both of them. Okay, now I'm going to take them out. What I have here is marks. You see that mark right there? That's where the set screw sits. And then there's one there as well, hard to focus. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a drill and drill a divot into the shaft on both spots. Not real deep, just deep enough so the set screw, when I tighten it in, will tighten into the divot and it can't slide on the shaft. There's the focus there. All right, let me get those drilled. All right, got the divots drilled in the shaft there. So now the U-joint can go on. Divots line up in there good. Can't see. And now we're going to put the set screws in for the final time and use some blue Loctite on them. Always want to Loctite these set screws. Don't want to mess around with the chance of them backing off. It's your steering. You don't want steering to fall apart. That's why we take extra steps like pinning them as well as welding and trying to make it safe. All right, so that's it. Loctite these screws, install them, and that is it for the steering column. It is finished. Okay, final part of the steering video. As you can see, I cut a section of double D shaft to tie the column to the rack. All works good. Couple things to note though. When you cut the double D shaft, start a little long obviously and sneak up on it, but what you want is when it's loose, like this is loose right now, it's not, there's no set screws, it can't come out. The only way I can get this apart is to lift this steering joint up off of the rack, and then I can get this whole thing apart. All right, bad angle here, but here's my shaft with the dimples for the set screws. But obviously the reason you don't want that to be able to come out without doing some work is that, God forbid, you Loctited everything and put it all together, but a set screw backed out while you're going down the highway. You would not want your steering to fall apart. If it got loose, you'd notice it, and you could safely get over to the side of the road. You make this too short so that it can just fall out, now you got a problem. All right, so never be too safe. There's just little things you can do to make your build that much better. All right, that is it for this video. Next will be, I don't know yet. I'm going to put this together. I'm not going to Loctite it because I'm going to probably have to take this apart again at some point, but I'm just going to put it all together with set screws, and I will see you on the next video.